Hi friends, I'm Hannah. If you're new here, welcome in. If you're returning, welcome back. And in today's video, we are going to talk about all the books that I read in February. February was a really good reading month for me again. I read 11 books total. And my challenge this month was to not just read and continue to do 75 books, because I'm still in the middle of the 75 book challenge, but it was also to read books that I was excited about. I feel like I am so much the type of person to buy books and then be really excited about them in the moment and then say, no, you can't read that because you have all this older stuff on your shelf you need to get through. So I decided that this month was not going to be that. And I was just going to read things that excited me and that I've been excited to pick up for a while. And I feel like that really paid off in the end. And I did read a lot of stuff that's been sitting on my shelf for a long time. And I had a lot of luck with that as well. But I do feel like overall, I managed to pick up a lot of really good books that were both new and old. So let's just dive straight into it. First book that I finished in February was a romance. I did read a lot of romance this month. I feel like that's just kind of par for the course for me in February. I love to just read romance in the month of love. And the first one that I picked up and finished was Bride by Ali Hazelwood. This is a paranormal romance and the second Ali Hazelwood I've ever read. I read Deep End last year, and I think I talked about it in one of the videos, the few videos I posted last year. This is kind of one of my first forays into paranormal romance. I read, like, many years ago, I had a friend who liked the Karen Marie Moning Fae romance. I think they were Fae. And I remember reading a few of those, like, way back in the day. This would have been, like, mid-2010s, probably. Actually, no, it would have been even earlier than that. It probably would have been, like, early 2010s, because I probably was in high school when I was reading those. So very long time ago. And I hadn't really dove into paranormal romance since then, but I figured this would be a good one to give a try. This is set in our world, but vampires and werewolves are real, and they all interact with humans. Like, these three groups are very much aware of each other. They have a lot of, like, centuries of history. And in this book, you were following Misery, who is a vampire, and then Lo, who is a werewolf. Misery is living among the humans at the start of this book, and she has chosen to live there because she doesn't feel like she fits in with the vampires, because for most of her life she was part of this deal that the vampires had with the humans, where they called it collateral. But basically it was like a high-ranking human would give a member of their family that they cared about to the vampires, and the vampires would do the same. And this was to ensure, like, a peace. Like, if the other side had some important person, like a child, usually, they wouldn't, that would keep the peace. And Misery had been that for quite a while, and because of that, she never really felt normal around vampires, so she always felt more at home among humans. Misery is called back because she has been betrothed to the alpha of the werewolf pack in the area, Lo. And this is to broker a peace agreement between the vampires and the weres. And so Misery, not really having much of a choice to do this, goes forward with the marriage. She has her own motivations for doing this, because you find out very early at the start of the book that somebody in her life has gone missing, and she is wanting to find this person, and she thinks that the weres may be able to help her, or at the very least give her new leads. So she decides to go through with this. Lo has his own motivations for wanting to do this as well, and then you kind of have Misery then being sent to live among the werewolves. The story kind of goes from there. I had a lot of fun with this. This is, I feel like, a really good starter paranormal romance, because, like, obviously vampires and werewolves are a big part of this story, but it's not, like, super overt. Like, there is some, like, anatomical differences, and they talk about how vampires have a different appearance to humans and all these different things, but it really is about more so than just those designations, and it feels very, like, accessible, I guess. As somebody who doesn't really read paranormal romance and has never really been attracted to it, like, I'm not a vampire person. I was never a Twilight girly when I was young. But I did have a lot of fun with this. And Misery, I think, is a really interesting main character. This, like, Spitfire who can take care of herself, but then she also has this very real, like, rawness and this, like, desire to be not necessarily taken care of, but, like, she's been alone for so long that you can tell she just doesn't know how to not be alone. And so when she is brought before people who, like, the weres genuinely seem to, they don't treat her, like a hostage. They are pretty kind to her overall. it just kind of, you can tell how that affects Misery. Yeah, I had a good time with this. Is it my favorite romance I've ever read? No. I think I prefer Deep End of the Ali Hazewoods I've read, but I already am, as of filming this, I'm in the middle of Mate, which is the sequel to this, and I am enjoying that quite a bit. I think I'm enjoying it more than I'm enjoying Bride, but we'll see. I think I have about like 100 pages left, so we'll see where I land there. But overall, I thought this was fun. If you are wanting to try paranormal romance, give this one a try. I feel like, again, it's just really easy to kind of wrap your head around in terms of paranormal. The next book that I finished in February was one of those books I mentioned at the beginning of the video, where it was something that's new to my shelf, but I was really excited about reading, and I just decided pick it up, enjoy it, and that is Swordheart by T. Kingfisher. I have never read any T. Kingfisher before. This is the first one, but I have a lot of her books on my want to read list, including, what is it, Paladin's Grace, I think is the first one, and others. But this one, the cover was what really attracted me to this book. I was obsessed with this cover design, and I had some friends who read it and really enjoyed it, and so I decided, okay, let's give this a go. In this, you are following Hala, and she is a mid-30s woman who, at the start of the book, there has been death in her family, and she has now inherited this person's entire estate. But the extended family is not happy about this decision. They feel like it has been stolen from them, all this stuff, and they have been basically treating her poorly, locking her up, trying to convince her to turn everything over to them, or all sorts of other stuff. Hala, feeling like she has no way out of this, decides that she must end her life, and that is the way that it will free her, because she has some other people that are relying on her, and she wants to make sure that this inheritance can go to them so that she can give them a better life and not to this greedy family. So Hala takes this sword off the wall of this room that she's been locked in, and she decides that's how she's going to end her life. And when she opens the sword, a man pops out of it, and this is Sarkis. Sarkis is the spirit of the sword, basically, and he declares himself protector of Hala, and this sends them on this journey to help Hala get what she's owed. And of course, these two are going to fall in love over the course of this. My favorite part of this book was actually the age of these main characters. You have two older main characters, which I feel like is just so nice to see in a romance. I feel like so much of romance ends up being like 20-somethings, and there's nothing wrong with that. I don't have no issues with reading all those romances, but I do love when you have a female main character who is like mid-30s and up, who has lived a life and who has all these different experiences. And Hala is very funny. She is kind of this, like, very much like, she weaponizes incompetency. Like, she pretends that she's dumb in order to get out of situations, which I think is hilarious. And it works very well over the course of this book. And the people that she meets and the way she interacts with them, I just think is so lovely and fun in so many ways. And I had such fun time reading this. I actually think the romance was obviously key to this, and I enjoyed it, but the story itself and seeing Hala interact with all these characters and do all these different things was probably the most exciting part of this for me. I gave this, I think, 4.5 stars. I don't even recall, but it was so much fun, and I'm really excited because the sequel to this is coming out in August, I think. I want to say it's not Daggerbound. Is it Daggerbound? I don't know. I don't remember what the title is, but I am very excited to read about this because the world of this is very interesting, and the knowing what the sequel is about, I think is going to be really intriguing. T. Kingfisher's writing is really great. I really love the style and the flow and the humor in these books. It feels very Princess Bride. That is like the best comparison I can make to this book specifically, is Princess Bride. It's just such a delight, and I had such a good time reading it. Shifting gears, the next book that I finished in February was Home Fire by Kamila Shamsie. This is one of those books that has been on my shelf for a very long time, but I had been meaning to get to it because people have raved about it. This won a lot of prizes when it came out. It was longlisted and put on a lot of like best books of the year lists, and I can see why after finishing this novel. You were following two families who are entwined because of an event that happened in their past, and then it brings them together again in the present. It is set in 2015, London and the US, and you were following the perspective of each of these different characters. It's a very interesting structure. It's segmented into each of these points of view as you move through the narrative. The first one you meet is Yzma. She is now pursuing her dreams of academia after having to put everything on hold to raise her younger twin siblings after her mother and her grandmother both suddenly pass away. Yzma is very much that eldest child type of person. She is very pragmatic and practical, and she has done everything that she could to make the lives of her siblings better. And now that she is leaving London to go to the States, she feels like she can finally live the life that she had to put on hold for so long. I really like Isma as a character, and I'm almost really sad that she's a first perspective we get, because as an oldest daughter, as the eldest child, there's a lot of things about her that I could connect with. The way she is introduced in the story, she's at the airport, and the other thing you need to know about her family is that she is Muslim, and that plays into the way she is treated and the way people interact with her. And it's a very hard read. The opening chapter is kind of a gut punch, because it's just so frustrating to have to see what she goes through, and that just kind of continues throughout the course of the book with all these characters. You then jump and you follow Anika and Parvez, who are her younger siblings. They are twins and they have always been very tight, but Parvez did something and he is kind of out of the family picture right now. Like, they really aren't speaking to him as much. And among all of this, then the other family kind of gets tied into this through Iman. Isma meets Iman when she's in the States, and they kind of make this connection. Iman ends up going back to London and connecting with the rest of Isma's family, and the story kind of evolves from there. This is a book that I think is uncomfortable at many times, just because of the circumstances that these characters face and the frustrations that come with the racial profiling that they have to deal with, and all of that. But also, it's a story that is about how far are you willing to go for love and family and the ties that bind you together. And there's just so many interesting things about this book, and it's not a book that I walked away from feeling like this was the best book I've ever read. The prose is beautiful and it is a great story, but drains you. This book drains you by the end of it. It's so emotional, and the final scene of this book, there are a few books that I've read where the ending is such a just powerful moment that it sticks with me as long, like, well past the time I read it. The Memory Police is one of those books. My Year of Rest and Relaxation. This is another one of those books where the final pages of this book, I think, are going to stick with me for a very, very long time. I really genuinely enjoyed this. I think the prose is phenomenal, and these characters are deep, and the story, I think, is really important to read. And I'm really glad that I finally got into it. I also think this is a retelling of a Greek myth. This is technically a contemporary adaptation of Antigone, which is another kind of angle to all this. And I'm not as familiar with the Antigone myth, but yeah, just this book was incredibly, incredibly well done. And I think it's going to stick with me for a very, very long time. Shifting to something that affected me deeply in a similar way, but different, I finished Once Upon a River by Diane Satterfield. This book was another one that's been on my shelf for a very long time, and I've heard great things about Diane Satterfield. She wrote The 13th Tale, and I never read that one, but people, I know, it was like, when it had its moment, people were in love with it. This is I believe, her second novel that she wrote. This is one of those books where I remember buying it and thinking, oh, this sounds really interesting, and then it just sat on my shelf. And like, I remember when I was cleaning up my shelves at the end of the year, I remember looking at this book and thinking, do I really want to read this anymore? And then I said, you know what, I'm going to give it a shot. I put it on my winter TBR, and I'm so glad I did, because this book was really, really stunning from a storytelling perspective. This is set in the late 1800s, I believe, and you were following kind of this wide cast of characters, and it revolves around this tavern. One night, it's a late midwinter night, these people are all sitting around drinking, and then the door bursts open, and a gravely injured man comes in carrying the body of a child. Everybody believes that that child is dead, and then suddenly that child comes back to life. And from there, all these stories start to spin about who this child is, where did she come from, what's her backstory, how did all of this happen? And that whole concept, just this idea, this theme of, stories and how they can change a person, and how people evolve and can take their own spin on an event when they were there, and how everybody wants to be a part of a story, is just such an interesting theme to work within of the course of the book, because that's really what this book is about. It's about stories, and it's about the way stories spread, the way that they morph, the way that they affect us, and the way that stories can affect how other people see us, gossip, and the way that things are interpreted by different people. They can hold a lot of power over us. So this was just really stunningly well done. The narrative just kind of shifts between all these different characters. You have a doctor that you're following, a photographer. There's all these people who believe that this girl, she's mute. That's an important detail. She's mute. She can't speak for herself. She's about like, I think about 5 years old at the time. An important thing to note is that this girl is mute, so she can't speak for herself, and that kind of adds to this mystique of this girl. You're following a lot of different characters who believe that this girl could be this person from their life, a missing child or sister, all these different things, and this girl kind of brings all these different people together in this larger narrative. There's a lot of things to like about it, I think, but it really is less. I mean, the mystery is a key part of this, and I was kind of driven forward by wanting to know who this girl is, where did she come from. But more so than that, it's really, this is a book about stories, and if that's the type of thing that you really like, I'd highly recommend giving this one a try. Moving in back into the romance genre, I decided to grab The Ornithologist's Field Guide to Love by India Holt next. This is another book that I've been very excited about getting to because I've heard so many great things about this series, and I'm happy to say I had a lot of fun with this. This is kind of a cozy fantasy romance that is set in a magical London, again, I believe at the turn of the century. I'm so bad with dates. Yeah, 1890. So you're following two professors of two ornithologists, Beth and Devin, and they are kind of rivals, and they both work for these other different professors, like assist, and they're all hunting rare birds. In this world, there are these magical birds that exist all over the place that can do different things, think like phoenix type stuff, and they all kind of get pulled into this Birder of the Year contest that is put on back in London in the UK, and this sends them both on this quest that ends up tying them together to try to find this bird. And this was just really, really fun. I mean, I don't really know what to say about it other than it's just fun. It's cozy. It's got the only one bed trope. It's very much, there are stakes involved in it, but it feels just very goofy. And you kind of know that the stakes aren't, things are going to work out just fine. The question of who's going to be Birder of the Year is a mystery up until the end. But I had such fun reading this. It was such a refreshing kind of take on magic. I feel like an ornithologist is not something you normally hear about as a main character in a fantasy of any type, but I really had a lot of fun with this. I think Devin is a delight. He's kind of that cad, and he a little bit of a rake kind of energy, and he's just a lot of fun. I think Beth is very kind of silly too. This is kind of in the vibes of like Emily Wilde. I've heard that comparison a lot. It's kind of that like academic fantasy. And I enjoyed this. I had a lot of fun with it. I have the second book on my shelf. I'm hoping to get to it probably, if not March, April, because I think the third book comes out in April as well. So it's just a delight. It's kind of this like adventure energy, a little bit of like almost The Mummy with some of the humor and like the antics of it. Obviously, this is set in London, very different scenery, but it's just, I don't know. I just had such a good time with it. It's very fun, and I just can't wait to read the next one. After finishing The Ornithologist's Field Guide to Love, I had to pick up a book for a book club that I'm a part of, and that was Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler. This was my first time reading Octavia E. Butler. I have wanted to read Kindred and some of her other books for a very long time, and I'm so glad that I finally dove into this. This is sci-fi, but it's almost really kind of more like speculative fiction, maybe speculative sci-fi. In this, we're following Lauren. She's 15. She's living in a 2020s very different from our own, where climate change and economic crises have decimated the planet, and she is living in a California where water is scarce, everything is scarce, and everybody just kind of does what they can to survive. This is told through her journal entries of her documenting her time living in this compound. It's a cul-de-sac that they have like walled off to make this like area with her family and a few other families. She lives with her dad and her stepmom and her stepbrothers and all these other different people. And this book is a very difficult read because I feel like there's so many things that parallel our current situation and the fears that we have for our near future. I think that's why the general consensus about Octavia E. Butler is she's terrifying to read because she's so accurate with her predictions of what might happen, which is a scary, scary thought. But I did find this to be like a very powerful read, even if it was a very stressful read. I spent the entire time reading this book just stressed out of my mind. I could not read this before bed because all I would do is sit awake and think about, oh my gosh, what if this happens in the real world? Like we could have this happen in the real world. Just the way that they have to, pay for water, and the lack of water, the lack of food, the idea that like you can't, you can't find work. There's a huge education problem, and they talk about that, how like Lauren's generation, there is no way for them to get an education, so how are they going to get these jobs that their parents had? They don't have the skills or the knowledge to do this. And Lauren, amongst all of this, is thinking about a future and how do we prepare for the future. And when everything kind of falls apart and she has to make this big decision to like move forward with her life and do these things, it kind of opens up this door for her to not only explore these ideas that she has for what the future should be, it makes her kind of question and challenge, what are you willing to do to survive, and the ethics and morals behind doing things in order to survive. People murder each other to take the supplies that they have and the money that they have, and it's crazy because they talk about the amount of money that people are carrying on them, and it's absurd amounts, but the way that the characters talk about it is like, that's not a lot of money because that can barely buy you like this amount of stuff. So it's just, this was so, like, even though this was such a devastating and stressful read, I think it was a really important read. And by the end of this book, just, I think the thing that I took away from it most was just the importance of, even in these like dark and dangerous times that Lauren faces, it's the hope for the future, the preparation to continue to fight, and the connections that you can make with a community around you are just so important to surviving just even the worst crises. So this has a sequel, Parable of the Talents, and I will pick that up at some point. I just think that's going to be something that I'm going to wait a little bit to get into, because this one, even now, even I'm sitting here holding it, it weighs heavily on me, and I just feel like I need to sit with it a little bit longer before I dive into the next. But highly, highly recommend. If you have not given Octavia E. Butler a read, I do really recommend this one. It's very dark, and there is a lot of hard things to read about, especially when you are looking at the years on, as they're going through 2024, 2025, all the way up. It gets difficult, but I think it's a really important book to read if you haven't before. It feels so weird to talk about this next book after talking about Parable of the Sower, but this was the next one I finished, and that was Nero by S.J. Tilley. This is a dark romance, and I'm reading this because I needed to read it for the Romanceopoly reading challenge, which I am doing in my reading journal. And one of the prompts that I need to do was read a dark romance. I am not a dark romance reader. I am not going to yuck anyone's yum. I know people love dark romance. I have many people in my life who really enjoy dark romance, but it's not something that I necessarily dive into that often. I did see that this book specifically was a really good kind of entry point to dark romance because it has a lot of dark romance elements, but it's not as heavy or dark as other dark romances can be. In this, it is set in Minneapolis, and you are following Peyton and Nero. Peyton is our female main character. At the start of the book, she is about 27, and she has been severely traumatized by events that have happened in her past. She lives alone, and she's kind of barely scraping by, working at a coffee shop. She is terrified of most men, doesn't like them due to stuff that happened to her in her past, and she's just kind of trying to get by. At the opening chapter, she is in her apartment and she's watching The Wizard of Oz, and she has her balcony doors open. She lives on the second floor, and she has her balcony doors open. She's just watching this movie, and she's waiting for this like storm to come. She just wants to like relax. And this man walks through her balcony doors and just drops down on her couch. And that man is our male main character, Nero. And Nero is obsessed with Peyton from the moment that he sees her. He's, I think, like late 30s, early 40s, and he is the head of the mafia, of like the mob in Minneapolis, which I think is very funny. I'm not saying that it's not real, but like, whatever. I'm not gonna debate that part. But Nero kind of just like makes himself at home, and Peyton is not really sure what to do about this. Like, she's scared, but then she's not scared, and there's a lot of like confusing feelings. And basically, the moment that Nero meets her, he's obsessed, and that obsession carries forward. I don't really have a lot more to say about this book. It was just, it's very spicy, very spicy. So I'd be aware if this is something you look into. There is a lot of violence, not towards Peyton, specifically, but just like general violence because it is a man who's involved with the mafia. It has a lot of interesting elements to it, I think. I mean, it was a really engaging book. I flew through it really quickly, and it, if I had to read a dark romance, I'm glad I read that one. Nero is a little bit, I don't know if I'd say he's a golden retriever, but he is definitely more golden retriever than a lot of the male main characters I feel like I see in dark romance. He's completely obsessed with Peyton, like doesn't really care about any other women the moment he lays eyes on Peyton, and he is pretty much willing to do anything for her, include like very like kind of sweet things. So yeah, I'm not going to say anything more than that. I think if you haven't given dark romance a try, this might be a good one for you. I think S.J. Tilley is a fine writer. Her stuff is her prose is very readable. The story's a little outrageous at times, but I had fun with it, and I guess that's the most important thing. And now we get to talk about what I think is my favorite read of February, which I know is crazy to say because I read so many great books so far this month. But this one, I don't know. This one stuck with me, and it was just so cute and fun and just something that I feel like I was really needing in the moment, and I didn't know that I was going to need it. And that was The Swan's Daughter by Roshani Chokshi. I read The Star-Touched Queen many years back, and I enjoyed the prose a lot, but I never dove into anything else that Roshani wrote. But this is the Fairy Loot edition of this book, and it's beautiful. I'm obsessed with these edges. They're just stunning. And this is a YA fantasy that is set in this mythical place where magic exists and all this different stuff. And you are following Demelza. Demelza is the daughter of a Veritas swan, and Veritas swans have the ability to transform from human into a swan, and their song can demand truth from somebody. Demelza's a little unique because her song is not quite as sweet as her siblings, and there's all these other different things that kind of come into play. But the important thing to note is that Demelza has to run away from home because somebody wants to harm her, and she has to go on the run. And she goes on the run to this kingdom nearby where the person that is hunting her cannot access her. And that is where she meets Prince Eris, our male main character. Prince Eris is a delight. This man has a single brain cell, and usually it's with his sister. And his family is cursed. He is cursed. He needs to marry, and his mother has put together this like bride competition where all of the eligible women from all over the kingdoms and nearby have come to compete for his hand. And Eris knows that this is basically his death sentence because his family is cursed, in that in order for somebody to rule this kingdom that he is the head of, all they need is the heart and the hand of the male royal. And so Eris knows that historically his ancestors have been killed immediately after marriage, and that's what he's kind of prepared for. And he's only like 18, 19 at this time that this is happening, so he's got a weird kind of attitude towards it. But when he meets Demelza tries to cut a deal with him. She says, I can use my song to help you find out which of these women are here to actually fall in love with you and marry you, and in return I need you to let me stay here so I can hide from the people that want me dead. And he agrees to it, and it starts this like very fun kind of just story that weaves these two together. The magic is really whimsical in this. It's very kind of, there's a lot of warmth to it. There's some silliness at times. It's just such a delight to read. I haven't read a YA in a long time that I've like absolutely adored, and this made me realize why I still do like to pick up YA sometimes. It was just fun and sweet, has that deep fairy tale element to it. Like it truly at times felt like I was reading a fairy tale, and I just had so much fun. And I thought the ending was really satisfying, and I think the way that she ends this book, there isn't kind of an implication that there is another way the story could kind of spin off. I don't know that there's going to be. I think this works perfectly as a standalone. I'd almost be sad if we had to continue this tale, although this world is very fun. If she wanted to tell a story in this world that didn't revolve around this specific area, I'd love that. But yeah, I had such a good time with this. I think this might be my favorite read of the month. I think it's this or Home Fire or Once Upon a River, I think are my top three for the month. But yeah, just an absolute delight. If you like kind of lighthearted fairy tales, I would definitely recommend giving this one a pick. Staying on the YA train, I also finished Passenger by Alexandra Bracken this month. I had a physical copy, I can't find it, but I read this one on Kindle. And this was another book that has been on my shelf for probably over a decade at this point. I don't remember when it came out originally, but it is part of a duology. I believe the second book is called Wayfarer. And this is a time travel fantasy romance where you were following Etta. She is from present day New York City. She's a violin prodigy, and she's about to turn 18, a couple months shy of turning 18. And the night of her big debut, she's supposed to be giving a concert at the Metropolitan Museum. She is whisked back in time to the 1770s, where she finds herself involved in this plot that involves time travel and her family and a lot of things she doesn't know about. While she's there, she meets Henry, who is a man originally from the 1770s who is also tied up in all of this for different reasons. And they are kind of forced to work together in order to get to the bottom of this mystery and retrieve this missing item that may make or break the world. The thing that I liked about this book, and this book is very slow moving. I think it has some really great historical research. Like Alexandra Bracken put a lot of work into researching this book, and that's very clear. The descriptions, the different time periods you jump to, like you can tell that that was a labor of love. I really enjoyed all of that, but it does make this book a very slow moving read. We spend a lot of time kind of settling into many of these time periods, and I enjoyed that a lot, and I think it kind of helps to build up the characters because you have characters who are from different time periods in general, and it kind of weaves everything together really nicely. But it does take a long time to go. I think this book is over 500 pages. I can never remember page counts, and I didn't write them down in my notes. I have my computer here, but I didn't write it down. But I had a lot of fun with it. And I think the concept is really interesting, the way that time travel works and the way that like the influence that things can have. There's just so many different interesting things about the lore that I actually wasn't sure I wanted to continue the duology until the very end. And then I was like, I do want to continue this because I need to know where this goes. I think the characters, they are very YA, and I think that makes sense because the decisions that they make, I think it needs to be somebody who's young making them. And I don't mean to say that young people make bad decisions, but I do think that they have a different perspective that like somebody my age, if I was thrust in the situation, I would be making very different decisions than what they did. I think it works very well. I think it's a really well done YA fantasy. Etta, I think, is an interesting character. I feel like at times was written a little, sometimes I felt like she didn't really make sense with her general characterization, but I feel like part of that might have just been because you kind of switch POVs and you're reading about her from another POV. But I did really like the dynamic between Etta and Henry, and I really liked where the story was going and the mystery, and I think there's a lot that can happen in this second book that I'm very, very, very intrigued by, knowing what happened at the end of this first one. It opens up the final couple chapters make you rethink a lot of things that happened earlier in the narrative, which I think makes for a great fantasy. So had fun with this. I'll probably get the second one from my library or something. It might be on Kindle Unlimited, but we'll definitely get to this at some point to finish this duology. The month wouldn't be complete if I didn't read at least one nonfiction, and I haven't dove into any yet. So we have one, though, that did take quite a bit of time at the end of the month, and that was Queen of Fashion by Carolyn Weber. This was the second book that I needed to read for my personal curriculum for the winter, which was all about Marie Antoinette and her fashion and her influence that her fashion had on history, both during the time of her life and after. This is a really great book to read in tandem with other Marie Antoinette biographies. Reading this with Marie Antoinette: The Journey, I think, is really interesting. This really focuses heavily on fashion, and not just on her fashion, but on the way that people's interpretation of her fashion influenced the French Revolution. There's an entire chapter in here talking about how her riding habits, what she wore when she started to learn to ride horses, and her decision to go for more masculine styles kind of redefined things, and how eventually that was used against her as the French Revolution wore on. It's a very well-researched book. I do feel like it's very interesting because she doesn't, I think when I read the Marie Antoinette: The Journey by Antonia Fraser, that was very much more like, there's a lot more sympathy, I think, for Marie Antoinette in that one than this one. This one is very much like, you made your bed, you have to lie in it. And I don't disagree with that take, because Marie Antoinette is partially responsible for the fall of France, or the French monarchy, I should say. But certainly she did not deserve to be beheaded. I don't think. You know, whatever. But this was really well done. I really enjoyed reading about the clothes because you don't get this type of analysis in other Marie Antoinette books. This is really kind of a unique story in that respect. She talks a lot about the silhouettes, about the hair, about where the origination of the poof and all of that. And it's very readable. It looks a lot longer than it is. Like a good back third of this book is simply notes and bibliography. So it's really a much shorter read than it looks, but highly recommend this if you like fashion and history, even more so than like anything with the French Revolution or anything like that. This is, I think, a really great read. Final book that we read in February was, of course, another romance, and that was With Love from Cold World by Alicia Thompson. I have never read anything by Alicia Thompson before. I think I bought this book on a random, when I was out at one of the random book events here in Chicago. I think I saw it on a bookstore table and I picked it up because I really liked the cover art. I was not expecting, though, I knew this was set in Florida, and it's set at this like tourist attraction where it's like winter year round. But I did not realize this was technically a holiday romance. This is set over the month of December, and so the holidays do play a kind of a big part in it. But it doesn't feel as much of a holiday romance as other books. Like it's a weird thing to kind of describe. But in this, you were following two characters. You were following Lauren and Asa. They are co-workers who work at Cold World, this tourist attraction. Lauren is like the finance accountant person, and Asa is just kind of an employee who has been there for a very long time. Asa's very like kind of goofy, silly. He likes to get under Lauren's skin. Lauren is very kind of straight-laced, very keeps to herself, not, kind of not totally sure about how to, like, I don't want to say interact with people, but she's a little bit stiffer than others. She doesn't have a ton of friends. And over the course of the book, these two characters are kind of forced to work together on this project for work, and it kind of very quickly expands their knowledge of one another and reveals a deeper connection and infatuation with each other than they neither really realized up until that point. There's some spice in here. It was a fun read. I don't think coworker romances are for me. It's not something that I am interested in reading, I don't think. And that's not to say this book wasn't well written. I think it's well done, and the tension is really fun. And there is a scene with them getting stuck in the office, which is always a great time. I feel like that's quintessential for a coworker romance. So there's things I liked about it, but I think at the end of this, I just felt like it was just kind of okay. Like, it was there, and I read it, and I finished it, but the characters didn't really resonate with me. Like, I didn't feel a super big pull to Lauren or Asa as characters. I was sympathetic to Lauren. I think in her past makes her, the things she was dealing with and working through, I thought was interesting. Same with Asa, but it just, I don't know, it didn't really hit with me the same way other romances that I read this month did. But if you want a good holiday romance, I would say give this one a try. It's very kind of, it'd be a good December pick. And I do think Alicia Thompson, her writing is very good. She like the prose itself is very fun, and I think she knows how to build up tension between two romantic interests for sure. So that's everything I read in February. Again, a lot of romance, a lot of really good books, a lot of things I'm really glad I finally got to. Parable of the Sower and Home Fire and Once Upon a River. Really glad I finally got to those, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what March brings. So tell me about what you read this month. Did you read anything that I've read? Have you read anything you think I would like? Give me your recommendations, give me your thoughts, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.